Me and Mike, the session before you, Mike communicated something to them that they were going to get a free session, but he forgot that he told them that. And so I've been here running it all day thinking that they were going to do 2 hours at a certain price, and it ended up being 1 hour free. So the income I was thinking I was going to make today, I was so excited. I was like, man, I made that in the morning, and then I'm going to make money tonight. And I had an idea of what that was going to be. And it didn't work out, but yeah, so that was kind of like, I would have changed how me and Mike communicate, where he'd let me know ahead of time, hey, here's what I told these. Like, there was very little information communicated on what they expected or anything. And so I even told him, I was like, it's all good, man, but we need to be better at telling each other what we told these people, because then we pass them off to each other, and it's like, they told me that you told them it was free, and I'm like, all right, cool. So that was it. Yeah, I don't know. Is that too specific? Is that too inside baseball and life?
Oh, I think that's great.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It's really what happened.
So one was like, and they both have to do with the studio, because that's kind of what I'm working on a lot right now.
Sure.
You know, a bunch of other cool things. I got offered to do another cool thing that happened is I got offered to do a spot at a paid gig in Redondo Beach at the end of the month. That's super dope. That's super exciting. But for some reason that feels less cool because I'm in that rhythm. This is like new and exciting. Things that do or don't happen with the studio feel like I'm closer and closer to a major goal and freedom. It makes me feel like I'm closer or further away from what I call freedom.
And that's because instead of suffering through a day job and then doing stand-up at night, you've decided to begin the studio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. If I can make it be...
I'm communicating for, for
so they know?
Who didn't know. That's your freedom.
Yep, exactly right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely
What about you, man?
Well, so on today's Wednesday, Friday morning, in a series of trips to the airport, picking up 4 of some of my close friends from where I grew up.
Yeah.
One of them's been to California before. The rest, nobody has. And we're gonna spend it, like I said, I was telling you in the elevator. We'll spend it up in Mammoth for about a week. Just
with the homies,
hiking like crazy. Yeah.
Staying at a cabin or something.
We just got a nice condo.
Cool.
Mammoth Lakes is it's a ski town. So it's all just nice condos, and this is like off season, So man, we are staying in a nice, like a big condo. Everyone has their own bed. There's several bathrooms, so we're not going to be bombing each other, know? And like I said, for 6 nights, and we're all paying like $38 a night or something like that.
Yeah.
Between the 5 of us.
That's awesome.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And you're going to be gone for a week?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really pumped about it. So to get to... the awesome thing is, like, I do this thing where if I have something I'm excited about, I try not to think about it.
Oh,
like,
I know what you mean, man.
I don't want to want it so bad.
It's also frustrating because you're like, you want to live. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, man.
Right. It's like when you're a little kid, and for like from the beginning of November, you're like, oh my God, Christmas is coming.
Yes.
Like, you're so excited, or summer vacation or whatever.
Yeah.
I used to die for summer vacation.
I know what you mean.
For like a month and a half out, I was counting every day, probably longer. But, but yeah, so now I get to finally think about it because it's like right on my doorstep, Yeah. And that's just really exciting. Not that I haven't been planning it and everything like that, but yeah, it's cool to like accept it as a real thing. But dude, something I would change is, and especially because we talk so much about meditation on here, being intentional, taking a second to ground yourself in the moment, things like that. I've been slacking this week.
Oh, word.
Maybe it's only been a couple days, but it just feels like I've been slacking, and I can feel like the weight of that,
Yeah.
So like, just when random things were happening today, I was just getting frustrated, and and so I realized, like, it's definitely because I'm not taking the time. I take 20 minutes to do this, every day.
And you haven't been doing it
much time. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the past couple days. Yeah.
That's it. That's all it takes, right?
Right.
A few days.
Yeah.
I noticed that it's like about a 3-day grace period where you're running off old fumes.
Yeah. No, and that's probably exactly it. It's probably been 3 days.
Yeah.
So I got to get back on it. But yeah, that's what I would change. And that's why.
That trip sounds fun, dude. I think, I don't know. I think that just like spending a week somewhere, especially like camping or like a true low-key vacation with a bunch of friends and nothing but time is the most fun. It's like being a kid again.
Yeah.
You kind of have that same feeling of a lack of responsibility and nothing but fun.
Well, and the whole thing kind of started because, man, before, like, I grew up, we grew up kind of similar, I think, but I probably had some more privileges. But, like, we go on vacation once a year or something and just go to the beach. And that pretty much was the extent of my traveling as a kid,
Right.
And my mom's someone who had done a lot of traveling in her life. My dad hadn't left Pennsylvania until he joined the Army, but once he did, he traveled, across the country. He stayed in Germany for a while, I think, just in the Army. But the two of them always got to travel and told me a lot of things about it, and so I think I developed like kind of fantasies of just traveling. And then almost maybe like the pinnacle of that for me is like going somewhere where other people haven't gone, or like that's been really not very
uncharted territory.
Yeah, right. It was almost like right, the peak of my fantasy of like traveling and what it would provide for me experientially. And so for that reason, right before, like in the year before Melinda and I moved out here, I had started to get into hiking and stuff. And just like on the East Coast, there's really, you can go on some long hikes. I mean, for God's sakes, there's the Appalachian Trail, which is months or whatever that takes you to do that. But it's really, everything kind of looks the same everywhere you go. It's pretty homogenous,
Right.
And probably the highest elevation you'd ever get is maybe 7,000 feet or something like that, which sounds like a lot, but compared to, the Sierras or the Rocky Mountains where you go hiking, sometimes you get up to 13,000 feet or something like that. You just a totally different experience. So that was one of my biggest goals, like moving across the country. We moved to Fresno originally, which is like an hour away from Yosemite National Park. We hit a bunch of national parks on the way. But yeah, one of my goals was to do some of these like remote backcountry hikes. And that's something I'm really proud of. Like I definitely hit the goal. I've done a ton of it, know?
Dope.
And I've done a ton of it with like really bare bones, no equipment.
Just Bear Grylls out there.
Kinda, like in my tennis shoes, and just my school backpack. Actually, Melinda's school backpack.
Yeah. Rugrats.
And so that's been like a really awesome experience for me, something I didn't think I could do because I'd always looked at these people and they have equipment, they've been doing it forever, they learned it from their parents, whatever,
Yeah, they wear tank tops.
It's tank tops.
Do you even have one of those?
Maybe one.
Can't hike without one, dude.
Yeah, I had to rip some sleeves off, dude.
That doesn't count.
But
you're a poser.
Yeah,
they'd be like, dude, I know what you're doing.
Well, and that's what it felt like at first. I did feel like a poser, but then I realized like you don't have to have all that stuff to just rip it. Just go for it.
Yeah, it's even more gangster.
So to get to my point, I saw specifically one friend of mine from home had just gotten into hiking over the summer, and every weekend I saw him out, taking trips into West Virginia or Virginia to go hiking. And then I could tell he really liked it. I could tell he felt the same way that I had felt, doing these things and thinking like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen,
Yeah.
And then having come west and just had my mind blown,
Yeah.
And so I just remember being in his position. I remember thinking that kind of doing a trip like that, going out west, high elevation, backcountry stuff was like out of my reach, And so I reached out to him and I just said, hey man, I don't know how long I'm going to be in California. So, come visit and we'll go do some serious, like we'll get out there, you know? And so that was kind of the point of the trip. And then like these guys just kept kind of tagging on, other friends of mine who are coming with me. But the cool thing is that this will be like, I think it'll be like a growth-filled experience too. Even though we're all hanging out and just having a good time.
Yeah.
Everyone else is pretty like intentional about, why they want to do things, why maybe they would want to go hike for a week out in the middle of nowhere,
You guys would do some mushrooms?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. The more I really dig into the meditation and the things I've been practicing like that, kind of the less I feel like taking anything out, drinking or whatever. I'm just less interested, honestly. And I attribute that to like, I don't know. There was another song I wanted to play at the beginning of this that maybe would help communicate what I'm trying to say. But I think when you're a kid, you're like often really amazed by life all the time. And I think it's constantly surprising you. There's like a mysterious and magical thing about life, you know? And I think we lose that as we get older. We maybe get more used to things. We maybe start to miss the value in a lot of things and instead see them as something we just need to do or get done, you know? And so life becomes kind of stale. But the more I do this, the more I find myself being like driving in my car and being like, oh my God, this is crazy, you know? And I honestly feel like that's really contributed to me being maybe seeing less use in things like that. But the mushroom thing, I really think is like, and I could explain this a little more, but I think it gives you a glimpse of something to aspire to, a feeling or like a confidence in yourself or about maybe the way the world works, which is very hard to describe unless you've done it. But anyone who has would kind of know what I'm talking about, this feeling of being interconnected with everything and everyone, and maybe feeling that your actions and your words and even your thoughts have a lot more weight than you really give them credit for. And so I think they're a great way for someone who's feeling like life is stale, and however that's manifesting, maybe in depression or maybe just not being as happy as they could be. I think that experience kind of gives them something to aspire to. I think a lot of people just get caught up and they think that they can only get it from taking this thing. But really it's just showing you what you can achieve on your own. And so that's why my long-winded way of answering your question, will I do mushrooms? In Mammoth.
Is that what
I might not because I just don't feel like I need to.
Like I can get there.
Yeah, definitely.
And
that's a cool thing.
Do you feel like when I am meditating and when I'm the state I like to feel is if I can wake up in the morning and do a breathing exercise that gets me sort of in the present and then feel gratitude, like on purpose, and feel grateful for something and think about something I'm grateful for long enough to where I can feel it, and then envision something that I would love to have happen in the future and then embrace the feeling of that happening. My most common way I know I got there is if I cry tears of joy, because it happening hits me so hard, and maybe a part of me didn't believe it could. And so then maybe there's this release of energy that it feels like it is happening. And so it's intense. So let's say I do that. And then I go throughout the day, and a piece of advice I heard is like the way to live, period, is to, when you feel that way over a couple of different ideas about how you want your future to be, is don't go throughout the day and think that anything else is actually true. Like start to operate as though that is true. Start to think that way. So if it was some elevation of money, start to feel like you have that money. Don't feel like you don't, or I'm just trying to be simplistic because you can pick anything.
Just keep the feeling with you.
Keep the feeling with you all day. Behave and try to think as if that were actively true and it happened that morning or whatever, just like it did in your mind and your emotions. What I find that puts you in a weird state of kind of like relaxed excitement, and you know what I mean? That's kind of the sense I get, is a relaxed, calm, it's all good, and also kind of excited for life about what might be happening next, because it feels like it's all unfolding in my favor towards the goal. If that makes sense?
It sounds like excitement kind of coming from confidence. You know?
Like I know that everything is kind of working together just perfectly, and even if I can acknowledge that that's wishful thinking, I can still say, no, I'm going to go ahead and believe that or whatever, and that takes time. What I'm saying is that when I do that the right way, The coincidences are insane, dude. And that's been one of the weirdest things that I've had to deal with. I'm talking insane level, the kind that you tell stories about, but they're all day. It's like one after another after another. I remember feeling really good the other day, having a meeting with Lewis. I was telling you about that. That day I was feeling amazing. I felt like I'm on the right path. Everything is beautiful. No matter what happens in this meeting, this is dope. And I was rocking that day, kind of feeling whatever. And I remember there was a point, I'm into fantasy football. I'm clicking around while I'm producing one of his podcasts, because we did a podcast in here and then met after. I'm clicking around. I get to this website where I'm looking at like fantasy football updates. This is very boring, but it has a point.
Go for it.
Over on the right side, there's always blurbs on players, and they're infinite. I mean, it's like this guy got an injury. This guy, there's so many little blurbs, and you scroll through them, and that's why you go to the site, little updates. As I'm looking and scrolling, I land on this name of a backup quarterback. His name is Nick Mullins. As I'm looking at his name, he goes, and we'll get Nick Mullen on here. And it's a different guy.
A comedian, I know.
But it's the same fucking name.
Oh, my God.
Bro. And it was in the instant. It wasn't that he said it 10 minutes ago, and now I'm looking. It's the moment I look at that guy's name.
Could you say anything?
No.
Could you tell him you're looking at fantasy?
I'm like, here I am. I'm in it. And the way I interpret that, because those are unique. You'd say, maybe that is just a coincidence. Like, yeah, but they happen more when I'm in the right mindset, period. There's no other way to quantify it. That is something that is true. They're happening more when I'm in the mindset that I was describing before.
Cool. And this is I want to keep going with this. This is a great way to lead into what we were kind of finished up talking about last time. So you're kind of talking about this ritualistic thing you have in the morning of kind of visualizing, first kind of grounding yourself in the moment, feeling gratitude for the moment, and then visualizing and creating in your head another moment in the future that you want to experience.
Yeah.
And being able to visualize that with such intensity that it's as if it's real, to the point where, right,
it's like I'm feeling gratitude for that now.
Right.
Like I have it.
Exactly. Right. And so strongly that, yeah, like you said, like the best thing that could happen is I might even start crying from it. I feel like
in the
it's
moment.
So real. Right.
In those meditations or in those visualizations. Yeah. And then the whole rest of the day feels like a beautiful unfolding of events. Anything can feel like it's the right thing. Now that's a feeling, but then there will be moments like that where a bunch of those are actually happening. And then things actually do unfold, and then they end up happening. And so that's a whole other fun thing. But in the meantime, the coincidences.
Well, and that's like what I'm talking about. Doesn't that make you feel like life is somehow magical or something?
Yeah, I'm seeing things come to fruition. We talked about this a few times, but I'm seeing things. I trusted people that said this works for about a year. Really worked on it, and I'm seeing it all unfolding into a full-blown life that I'm living. Whereas before, all I had was the feeling and maybe some coincidences.
And faith. Yeah.
And I just trusted and hoped that if I did it long enough, I mean, it feels better to feel better. So at least, you know what I mean? So at least trying to feel better in preparation for the future, at least you're having a better day anyways, even if nothing changes.
And I think you and I took the same attitude. And I realized early on that even if I wasn't maybe manifesting these fantastic things in my life, I was at least frequently having the experience of feeling what that would feel like,
right,
and feeling better from it, and living a better life.
You live a better life.
So I realized kind of early on was, regardless of whether or not I'm getting these things that I think I want right now, the specific thing, sure, I'm living my life in a way that just feels way better.
What do you think about the coincidence? Can you relate to that? That's why I brought it up. I was curious, because for me, it's like night and day. They'll be all day. I'll have 2 or 3 on when I'm feeling that way, when I'm in that zone. And I'm in that zone as many times as I have that good morning. And then it's like that. I definitely
know that I've experienced what you're talking about. And the second you said it, I started trying to think of my own, but they're not on the top of my head. I'm sure if I sat here quietly and somebody listened to a podcast silently for 15 seconds, maybe I could come up with one. I know what you mean.
They're not jumping out.
Right. But I know what you're talking about, for sure. And at the very least, just the things I'm hoping and wishing for, I'm being led to them, even if it's not an instant, I was thinking about this and here it popped up.
Yeah.
It's at least sometimes even just at the end of my day, the thing has happened, that I was wishing for, or thinking about or whatever. So in that way, yeah, I've definitely experienced that, and it's been amazing. And it's made me obsessed with this idea of cultivating the faculties that are responsible for your imagination.
Right.
In order to make that imagination stronger. And this is what I just said, cultivating the faculties responsible for your imagination.
Yeah.
That is something that we were talking about last time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was brought up because you and I both have experience of being involved with a Christian church and really trying to make that our lifestyle, and being devoted to the practices and beliefs of Christians.
Yes.
And one of those, within those beliefs, there's a lot of kind of rules and suggestions, at least, about how to live your life sexually. Mm-hmm. And we kind of got into that. And I think if I remember right, it was just almost like a throwaway comment. You brought up like that, yeah, you're taught not to masturbate at church or whatever. Not masturbate at church, but they teach you at church to, wherever you are.
I have a joke about that.
Oh, yeah?
I wrote a joke about that line.
Uh-huh. Well,
yeah.
Hey, there's a coincidence for you.
Yeah.
But
wait, you just said that organically? I thought you were saying that I said that. You were just saying that just now. Oh, you said not at church.
Yeah, you said something completely different. And I just brought this up now.
Oh, I say that. I have a joke where I'll just do it real quick. I say, church. I was in church for a while. I had to get out. If you're listening, this joke is way funnier when I really lean into it. I'm just going to say the words. I was in church. I had to get out. Church has weird rules. Like you're not allowed to masturbate in church. And then I go, well, obviously you're not allowed to masturbate in church. You can't do it at home either. That's one of the first little laugh points. And you just said that.
Yeah, how weird.
That's hilarious. There it is.
There you go.
That's hilarious.
But what's so significant about that
But you didn't meditate today, dude, so I don't know if we can buy into that.
Let's just shut the podcast off. But what was significant about that is that, you go through with those kind of sterilized teachings in a way, or at least maybe coming from a source that has sterilized them. And so the interpretation becomes, okay, I'm not supposed to masturbate because the Bible says
bad.
No.
God, you go to hell.
It's bad, right?
And because, I'd like to remember the reasons. They were like, because you want to be holy for your future partner. Mm-hmm. You want to be clean and pure for them. Mm-hmm. You want to be the perfect version. It's all very vague.
Mm-hmm. And this is what I heard too. Yeah. This was my experience as well. But what I brought up is that through kind of looking at other sources, that stemmed from the same beliefs that Christianity does, those sources, which are thousands of years old, identified something that I think is totally legitimate. We were talking about last time.
Yes,
is that, to stay on the topic, if before our cell phones and before like pornography was everywhere, you had to use your imagination. And kind of the more in the mood you were, the better your imagination seems to be. When imagining whatever scenarios that you need to imagine to get you through the session there.
Whatever you're into, man.
Whatever you're into. But the point being, the session. I'm just trying to keep it professional.
I know, yeah. I love that.
The point being, the more kind of sexual energy you have pent up, the better your imagination becomes.
Yep.
And it's something that most people, if they just think about all the sessions they've had, could probably identify that that's true. They could probably think, I guess there have been times where I was really in the mood and my imagination was incredible, and so what I suggest is that the teaching part is being lost. You're just hearing, don't do this, it's bad. Don't masturbate, it's bad. It's bad for you, it's bad for your future, all these types of things. What I'm suggesting is that the real reason comes from the fact that they were these ancient teachers who wrote these things and who practiced these things were doing so because they knew that it made your imagination much stronger. They knew that building up this energy, not throwing it away every day or every chance you got
would
not only test your will, which is important, but it would give you more energy for your imagination to use. And so if we're talking about visualizing and imagining what you want, making it such a solid concept or such
that it's like a memory,
a solid picture. Exactly.
That's how I like to describe it.
And that's a beautiful way of describing it.
Yeah.
Definitely accurate. It is that by making the most solid image in your mind of what you want, you're more likely to manifest that thing. I think from what you've just described 5 minutes ago, you'd say that's probably true. You're saying you've identified that sometimes you can imagine it to a certain extent where it still helps. It still makes you feel good. But other times you can imagine that thing that you want to such an extent that you feel the emotions of having it.
Yes.
And what I'm suggesting is that kind of by this formula that I'm laying out is that the more of this sexual energy is just one way of getting energy.
Mm-hmm.
But in this example, the more you build up that form of energy, the better your imagination is going to be, or the more energy will be available for the faculties that are responsible for your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you're going to begin to visualize much more clearly what you want. And hopefully there's this direct relationship between your ability to visualize and your ability to manifest.
Right.
And I'd like to hear what you said, what you think about that. But I have some passages that I'll read and we can get into that are kind of talking about the same thing.
I was just gonna. Why do you think they knew that? Like, do you think that they understood? Do you think they understood the process of imagination versus reality? Because I mean, that's essentially that's what a lot of the law of attraction people are kind of saying, but it kind of sounds like it's just that they were more in tune with the idea that what's happening in the inner world and what's happening in the outer world are connected in a more, well, maybe we don't know the scientific way, but we know through practice how it seems to work out. Do you think they knew that better than we do?
Yeah, definitely.
Or was it accident?
I'll take a. Oh, I think it was intentional.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll take a stab at explaining this. But in most of these societies that you could join that would teach you something like this, which would be probably from Freemasonry, is probably the best example for most people have heard of Freemasonry.
Yeah.
What I just said would absolutely be taught you there, because these are concepts
the sexual one?
Sexual alchemy. And alchemy.
Alchemy that's a great root of this type of thinking, yeah? The world of alchemy?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. In alchemy, what a lot of people don't really realize is that alchemy is always really supposed to be metaphorical.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, you said it seems like these people in ancient times had a much better grasp of this than we do now. And maybe not even in such ancient times. Like you'll look at any quotes from somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, and he's stressing how important the imagination is. Nikola Tesla, the same thing. We've talked about this on the podcast. Is that he said when he was creating a new invention, he would go through and step by step create every part in detail of the entire invention in his mind through his imagination before he began.
Yeah.
And he said that that's where the real work is done.
Yep.
And that after having that solid image of every little bit and piece of this thing he was going to create, after forming that image, it was much easier to do the thing he was setting out to do, to manifest the image.
Right.
But so I think that in many of these societies, the reason I brought up the societies is that they teach you that throughout time, humans, at least their perception of the world has become more material, more materialized. I'm not saying materialistic like in the way that people like to have an iPhone.
No, just the five senses.
That people became more and more grounded in the five senses. Yeah, exactly. What could be measured.
And then reason from the five senses.
Exactly.
From the order of the five senses.
Right.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, you have to imagine yourself in a time where the things you see in your imagination or the things that you see in a memory, which is those you're seeing both of them in the same way, when you remember something or imagine something, neither of those things are in front of your eyes. Yet you're seeing them sometimes in better detail than you could with your eyes. Sometimes in your memory, you can remember what something felt like to touch or what it tasted like.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
In addition to what it looked like.
Yeah, because it's kind of cool because when you think of a memory, I mean, almost, I think a lot of people could probably relate to it. It's always a little hazy. You know, memories are like you have flashes of moments, and you have to kind of really ponder them to start to get into the emotion that you felt doing it. But you have to really get there. You have to really kind of focus on that, and then it's still hazy. But then you can kind of connect with it emotionally and be kind of feel what you felt about it, good or bad. And I can say it's like literally the exact same thing for a future vision. As you start to crystallize it, it's the same amount of hazy, but there's flashes of clarity, and then you get sensations based on the moments that you're actively participating in, which I find to be the trick. If I were helping somebody do it, I'd be like, you have to, you know what's beautiful? I realized this. It was like people say be in the present. That used to really frustrate me because that's impossible. You can't be in the present all of your life. You kind of have to analyze past and future versus but I realized that being in the present can also be being present with something you're thinking about. You see what I'm saying? So you can be present with a future idea and you're being in the present. If you're sitting and you're really thinking about something as an idea of something that you'd like to have happen, and you're really present with that, you're in the present. You see what I'm saying?
What you're describing is the fact that you're thinking about being in the present means I have to be right here.
Right here, yeah.
But really,
Zach,
it's
the computer.
Presence can be non-local. It can move around. It can go to other places.
It's really just an awareness on one thing instead of scattered on,
And it's a lot like the way people would describe consciousness too. You
Yeah.
know? And they would say your consciousness can move around. It doesn't have to stay just right here, you know.
But it's one of those things where it's just like, poorly defined, and then when you see it the way you see it, it clicks. Like I'm like, oh, I can be present with a memory.
Well, and so imagine these things you're saying, but in a time where you have no knowledge of science or measurement or any of these material ways of thinking. And so for you, these imaginations that come, whether it's an imagination of the future and a daydream or something like it, or a real dream or a memory, all of those things are going to seem inseparable from your waking life, you know, because there's not been a distinction made between any of them. And so because of that, people were much more keenly aware of what they were imagining, what they were dreaming and remembering.
And that was, what do you think was the shift, the Enlightenment, like the scientific revolution?
Well, what I'm talking about is people thousands of years before that, because you asked, why were these people seemingly more keen to this than we are?
Do you think there was a shift?
I think there's been a shift out of it over time.
Do you have an idea when that was or why?
I think there's been, I don't think it was like a light was on and went off or whatever. I think it was a series of things over millennia, you know, or centuries at the very least. But all I'm trying to describe is just that I think for those people that was life for them, where the memories, where these visions that would come to them in that same way were just as real as anything else going on. And so for that reason, I think they were a lot more, they were thinking a lot more critically about how can I improve this ability? And that's when some of them noticed the sexual energy component to it. I would argue that they also noticed that it was enhanced by being in a group of people, just like a group of people will pray for something, because you feel that when everyone's united in the same intention, that there's more power to it. And so, I think because life was less solidified in a material nature, I think people were much more aware of the immaterial things that were going on in their minds. And so they really focused on how do we make these stronger. And I think even though many, many, many years have passed, and that we live in a world now where we can be extremely grounded in the material world, I don't think those old ways of thinking or practicing certain things have vanished. I think they're still there. And now we can do both. And that's the benefit of being alive now. But maybe we were talking about something before that. But I think that is definitely where ancient peoples kind of clued into this, these other sources of energy. Like I say, I bring up with the energy of a sexual experience, or the energy of being in a group of people. Those are definitely big things. But here, so you pulled up a good post. I mean, I don't know if you can. The picture is what's important. I'll read it from my phone. But this is what book is this from? I don't know if it's given.
What did we leave off on the last one? What were we talking about?
So at the very end of the last one, we were really talking about the change you and I both have kind of experienced in the past year, that has kind of given birth to these ritualistic things we're doing, just to ground ourselves in the present, or however you want to say it, and then also use our imaginations to help kind of manifest things into our lives.
Is that what we ended by talking about?
We ended talking about the changes that have happened that allowed us to do that, but before that is when we were talking about this idea of
the sexual thing.
The sexual thing.
Right.
And the fact that a lot of times, you what you said was like, you'd heard over and over again how to behave in regard to masturbation or other things.
But never why.
But you've never there's always been something missing. Where you've always tried to understand, but it wasn't there, and now you hear this thing and you go, "Oh, wow, that totally makes sense." Yeah, and I could see why someone would recommend this. I've
been yanking less, dude. 100% since then.
Have you noticed anything?
I mean, I feel great, but I think that I've heard from so many different sources. Let's leave Christianity aside. Sure. I've heard from just spiritually types that there's chakra energy in not blowing a load. I was trying to be more not vulgar, and I said
bro.
Blowing a load, and and just like, you summon the energy, blah blah blah, and so and I've actually trusted it more from the woo woo types and then tried, but that was that last little bit I needed, and now I've been, I don't know, I think that whether it's a placebo or not, I feel more powerful.
Well, and if you're going to continue to do this, I recommend monitoring your feelings, and once you get a few days in, notice if you feel, in my experience, what I feel is I'll start to feel distracted, and I'll probably start to feel distracted thinking about something sexually related. You know what I mean? But then it's also just kind of an overall distraction that I feel in my life. And that feels chaotic to me. It's like a stressful experience.
You feel like your brain's just like on coffee or something?
Kind of, yeah. Or like I can't wrangle it in,
Yeah.
And so that is usually the incentive for most people to say, I got to get this out of me, I got to
But you know what's funny? This. They probably don't even put the two together. Like I wouldn't. If I was ever feeling anxious, I would never put together that I'm probably going to yank and feel better.
I think a lot of people, I've at least heard a lot of people say that.
Fair enough. I never have. I've always done them. I've always thought of them completely separate.
One
was the instinct to sex drive. Yeah, but they're probably connected. I would just think like, oh, I'm thinking a sexual thought. I got to go handle it. That's how simple I am.
Sure.
You know.
Right. And so what this energy feels unpleasant to have.
Yeah.
And so you don't even think about it as energy. You just think, I have an unpleasant feeling. I would like it to go away. But really, that should ring a bell. You should go, oh, there's energy building in me.
How do you think you channel it to something productive?
Practice. Just in the way that one of the first things you said you do in your day is, instead of just going into your day, now you're taking a moment. You're taking a moment to feel grounded and feel gratitude for what you have in that moment. I think that's the first step, and then just like you said, where your second step is that you start to think about the future and something that you want. I'm giving you the finger. I didn't even mean to.
Second step is what up.
But so I think you could do exactly what you do in your morning, but do it when you feel that feeling. Yeah. So in your morning, the first thing you do is you wake up, take a moment, whether you're somebody who likes to pray in the morning, this is kind of your form of a prayer,
Yeah, you can do anything.
Feeling gratitude, feeling in that moment, not being distracted by maybe the fact that you're hungry or that you could have something to do or that you need a cup of coffee. You know, you're just saying, I'm going to live in this moment and be thankful for it. And then go on and use your imagination to think of another moment that you do want in your life in the future. I would recommend doing the same thing when you're a couple days in and you start to notice that you're having these thoughts or you're having these feelings that you want to go away. Transform it into a feeling that you want to have and use that energy to transform it into that feeling that you want to have. What I just described, transforming this, is what in alchemy they're talking about as transmuting something. This is where that energy is coming in as this chaotic sexual energy. That's a base metal. It's something that you don't, that's kind of worthless. And by transmuting it into an ideal, something that you want in your future, something that now you have this energy to imagine it even more strongly so it manifests.
And feel it stronger.
That is where the base metal is transmuted into gold.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is where the idea comes from.
That's really cool.
Right.
Yeah. I dig it.
And so that's kind of what this post is up there talking about. Hopefully I
can pull it up for them. They can see
stumble over this. But it starts off, it says, imagination, the creative faculty of the mind, which in magic is the formative power for bringing things into manifestation. Imagination is an orderly and intentional mental process. It is distinguished from daydreaming and fancy, which consist of random thoughts and desires. It is not unreal, but it is a powerful creative force that becomes reality, especially when stimulated in deliberate ways by ritual. Imagination is the power of self-healing and miracles, prophecy, and clairvoyance. Imagination works in tandem with will as a team of two most potent forces employed by the magician. I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Iamblichus, writing in the Mysteries, said that imagination is superior to all nature and generation, and through which we are capable of being united with the gods, of transcending the mundane order, and of participating in eternal life, and the energy of the super celestial gods. Through this principle, therefore, we are able to liberate ourselves from fate. Imagination creates thought forms on the astral plane or higher planes, which are as objective and real to the entities existing on those planes as our earthly surroundings to humans. The thought forms created by imagination must be vitalized, powered, and directed by the will. Otherwise, they will be transient. An example of how imagination is employed in occult practice comes from the writings of Dr. Edward Berridge, a homeopathic physician and member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Berridge's occult name was Frater Razergem. Berridge was consulted by a man who said that, and this is going to be an example of how to employ the imagination in Berridge's writings. Berridge was consulted by a man who said that several years prior, he had been in the frequent company of a man who made the constant use of a certain profane expression. The word had stuck in his mind. He could not rid himself of them. Berridge believed that the words were like a mantram and had the effect of vitalizing an elemental entity that had attached itself to the man. He prescribed a magical remedy. I advised him the next time that the phrase troubled him, first to imagine he saw before him some horrible creature as the embodiment of the profanity itself. Next, to hold this creature firmly before him, and then to send forth an occult dynamite shell, penetrating the elemental, and then exploding and blowing the elemental to atoms. The man did as instructed. He said that he had not succeeded in destroying the elemental, but he did manage to send it away, though not permanently. However, he was seldom bothered by it. So I wanted to bring this up specifically to address something that you had said the last time, but I think I failed to write it down. But minus that end prescription he gave to someone, that is just that is kind of a definition of what I've been explaining about how the imagination works almost in a magical way. And you have to be forgiving because they're speaking about magic or using these things as a metaphor for something that is real and could be explained by logic. but like a myth or a legend, if received in this way, it's more helpful for you to kind of digest.
Yeah.
But so
super interesting.
At the beginning, what he's describing is how the imagination works with these thought forms, that on this higher plane where there's these other entities existing, your thought forms are just as real to them as this book or this phone is in my hand. And so because that's true, you can use these things as a tool. And so in that example that followed, there was a man who just said he'd been troubled by something that someone had said to him.
What he was saying. Isn't that what he said? Isn't the story that he was saying a phrase that was like
So what the story is that that there was a man who had been troubled by a phrase that he had picked up from someone he had been around. Something negative, something really bothered him. Mm-hmm. You can think of it in whatever way you want.
Yeah, it could be.
It can apply to your life. Well, right, exactly.
You suck.
I'll give an example. I have really long hair right now. I've never had long hair. Somebody made a comment about long hair being like a gay thing.
And now you keep going.
Although, am I? Is this? This is what I needed to find out. No, the opposite. That's why it bothered me. Is because it's like, what are we talking about here? Like, what's the point of the comment you even made? Yeah. You know, especially in a conversation with someone, why would this even come up? But I thought in the moment that like, that's silly, I'll forget about it. But later I thought about the fact that I felt that it was silly of that person to bring this up, and that was bothering me. So for me, in the same example, I would create whatever that conversation was with that person, or that exact thing that they said that was bothering me and kind of haunting me in a way, kept coming back, kept making me angry, even though it had been long gone. I should use my heightened imagination and the skills I've cultivated to use my imagination in a way where I can solidly see an entity, an ugly entity that embodies that thing that the person said to me.
And then destroy it.
And then I can shoot something at it to kill it. And that sounds silly. And
Bro, I'm telling you, dude, if somebody wants to really change Tony Robbins, dude. I really think I'm going to prescribe to people. And they're like, I don't know how to do. I'm like, let's get Tony Robbins' Personal Power 2 from 1996.
And this is what we were talking about last time, and I'm sure that's why I'm thinking of this.
Bro, it's genius level. He has that prescribed in there. He goes, if you can find a belief that you think about yourself, conceptualize it in a scene or an image, and then he starts talking about scrape over it with marker, put clown faces all over it, reframe it. And then crumple it, and then he suggests in your mind pulling it small and then whooshing it away. Like the way he describes it is essentially the same thing. Sillify it, like make it silly. That's not a word. Sillify is not a word. Make it silly, scratch it up, and then obliterate it.
That's your job. You're a sillifier.
I'm a sillifier. I'm here to sillify this bitch.
A professional sillifier. That's exactly it.
That's a 1996.
And a really good one that most people would know is, I think, from Harry Potter 3. It's the one with the werewolves and stuff.
I haven't seen that one.
Harry and his friends go into a class where there's a wardrobe and it's bouncing around and there's something evil inside. And the teacher opens the wardrobe, Professor Lupin is who it is. And he opens the wardrobe, and out from it comes this thing that he calls a boggart, which has no real form. But whomever is standing in front of the wardrobe, the boggart will approach them and take the form of their greatest fear.
Yeah.
And so the spell to make that boggart lose its power is to say ridiculous and point your wand at it. Right. And then suddenly, I think Ron's afraid of spiders, and he says ridiculous, and suddenly the spider has rollerblades all over its legs and can't stand up,
So these are ancient.
Right,
These techniques are ancient.
It's just that for anyone who's seen Harry Potter, that's exactly what we're talking about here.
5 minutes, by the way.
5 minutes left. Oh my God, that flew through. Okay, well, let's quickly just look at a couple other ones, and I'll try to pick out the ones I thought would be most interesting for you. Here's another one. If you want to pull up that second link, This one's a little bit shorter, and I can read faster, but it is in the same vein of exactly what we're talking about.
This one?
Yep, that's it.
All right.
And these are all of these images are images you'll find in occult or Masonic circles or any group, because they're full of symbolism.
Right. Cool.
The nursing mother sitting on a crescent moon. These are all it's very specific symbolism.
Right.
But this talks about the biblical and Quranic idea. Quranic meaning from the Quran. The biblical and Quranic idea of sin is derived from the Sumerians, who taught that sin meant to waste sperm. Retention of semen is vital to good health, longevity, spiritual ascension, and clear intellect. Many of the other so-called sins are priests' ideas of those things which, in the immature, could lead to loss of sperm.
All sin comes down to loss of sperm?
At least this is what they're saying is the biblical and Quranic idea of sin that is derived from the ancient Sumerians, who were we think of them as the beginning of culture in Sumer.
Gotcha.
And that's where they're saying the lineage of the idea of sin comes from.
And then they complexified it to mean other bad things, but it originated with...
Well, it's not even a complexity. They're trying to show you your lack of insight about all the actions you do in your life that you think are meaningless, that they're not going to harm anyone. And this is kind of what you're talking about. When you were at church, they were teaching you, you shouldn't masturbate or you shouldn't have premarital sex, because you want to be pure for the person down the line. You want to, you have all these things, and it's talking about in the future. And in that moment, you can't see how any of these things are connected. But let's just use as an example. Let's say, here's an example. So, maybe a sin would be to say a swear word. Okay. Maybe I let one slip. I'm by myself. Who cares? I'm alone. No one's even around. How could I affect anyone? Right. And I kick my toe and I go, shit. It's going to make it easier the next time I kick my toe to go, shit, and then suddenly, as most people will probably notice if they've ever tried to swear less or do anything less, you gave in on this one thing, and so it starts happening all the time. Then maybe I get in a conversation with someone at a later time, and now that I've been swearing more alone and thinking it's not affecting anyone, maybe it's just making me more of a negative person, so that when I get in a conversation with someone later, they're going to feel that negativity that I'm not even noticing anymore. Yeah. And assume that that's kind of who I am. And in that way, I've done a detriment to the character of myself and the character of myself that others are viewing. Right. And then to make it even more concrete, maybe I swear at them by accident, just because I've become accustomed to it. And that even if it doesn't mean anything, even if it's not a big deal, you don't know how it's going to affect another person. Yeah. And so if I do anything to affect this other person negatively, I might not even see it. Yeah. And that's what this is talking about, is that this is talking about the priest's ideas of sin are the things in which the immature could lead them to loss of sperm, is their example. But it's what's being implied is that there's one thing that is definitely the sin. But the priests are saying there's other, maybe in Catholicism, people are familiar with cardinal sins versus the other types of sins. Yeah. Cardinal sins being like if you murder someone, if these are like irrevocable sins kind of, or at least they're more important or bad, know. And that's kind of what's being described here, is that there's this idea that we want you to preserve this thing because it's good for you, Going against it would be a sin, okay? But also doing things in completely maybe unrelated portions of your life that could lead you to committing that ultimate sin should also be sins of some kind, is what these people are saying. And I'm not trying to instill, these beliefs of being a sinner into everyone right now, but these are just... at the very least, think of them as a metaphor. Well, the concept of sin, the word sin has connotations, but the concept is just the idea of a value structure of activity, which there is. Some things are better to do than others. Some thoughts are better to have than others.
that's how life is. That's how existence is. We put value over on anything compared to something else. Otherwise, everything is meaningless. So a sin is something that's just in some category of something that's going to harm you or another person in some way, whether small or big. But it's in a value system of behaviors that it's not good.
Or in the future, or it's going to
lead to it.
It's when, and I frequently do this, and I do this almost as in a symbolic way.
Yeah.
In the morning, when I go through the things I'm gracious for, I have gratitude for.
Yeah.
Maybe think of what I want to manifest in my life. I do often end it as, please forgive me for my sins. And I don't mean that in the way that is so often heard in church.
It has nothing to do with hell.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's almost like if sin was an acronym, it's just summarizing the thing I mean. What I mean, and I'll say it specifically many times too, so that I can really feel it. I will say, please forgive me for the things I do for which I do not know the consequences of. And that I'm often willfully ignorant of the consequences of these things that I do.
Who are you asking for forgiveness from? Something?
The great creator.
Yourself in a way?
Whatever force I believe is benevolent and at the source of all of these things. More than anything, it's just, even if it were to no one, it's me admitting that there are things that I commit actions for which I do not know the results. And because of that, I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to regret things, and I'm going to do things that affect other people that I may never know of. And that's what I'm truly sorry for.
Right.
And trying to admit it,
Right.
But yeah, it's not to make myself feel bad. It's just to admit and to make myself more aware of it. Like I should be conscious of these. How am I affecting everyone around me?
Yeah.
And what can I do to make sure that everyone is just receiving good stuff from me? So that's why I do it. I realize we're kind of out of time. If you want, I can read one more thing. And if you wanted to play a song after that, we could do that.
What song do you want to play?
After I read that, they kind of go hand in hand, I think.
You gotta cue it up.
If you could find The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel. And then also, if it's not too much to ask from you, if you could bring up one of these links as well.
Yeah, which one?
It should be the second to last, so it should be 6. It's a woman with quite a scary shadow figure in a mirror.
Yeah, got it.
And I'll also ask you to look at the symbolism of this photo. Okay. You'll notice that that scary person behind her is holding the candle in a very specific way, making a very specific hand gesture. And not only that, but the mirror on the back has quite an interesting figure. Just for some thought.
Check this out.
But these are some excerpts from writings from Carl Jung, who you might be familiar with.
Oh yeah.
And Jordan Peterson would probably be a big Jungian guy.
Big JP's all about it.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. Okay, so our shadow. According to Jung, the human being deals with the reality of the shadow in 4 ways: denial, projection, integration, and or transmutation. There's transmutation again.
Right.
Filling the conscious mind with the ideal concepts is a characteristic of Western theosophy, but not the confrontation with the shadow in the world of darkness. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Taking it in its deepest sense, the shadow is the invisible saurian tail that man still drags behind him. Carefully amputated, it becomes the healing serpent of the mysteries. Only a monkey parades with it. The integration of that was from the integration of personality. To confront a person with his shadow is to show him his own light. Once one has experienced a few times what it is like to stand judgingly between the opposites, one begins to understand what is meant by the self. Anyone who perceives his shadow and his light simultaneously sees himself from 2 sides, and thus gets in the middle. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all of his projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. Such a man has saddled himself with new problems and conflicts. He has become a serious problem to himself, as he is now unable to say, they do this or that, they are wrong, and they must be fought against. Such a man knows that whatever is wrong with the world is wrong within himself. And if he only learns to deal with his shadow, he has done something real for the world. He has succeeded in shouldering at least an infinitesimal part of the gigantic unsolved social problems of our day. And I think that definitely applies to now.
Yeah.
But we'll wrap it up on that. I think maybe we've talked a lot about meditating, what we want in the future, manifesting, idealizing. Those are all very positive things that make us feel good. But I think we'll get into this next time, the significance of acknowledging the darker nature we all have within ourselves.
Yeah, and what to do with it.
What to do with it. And I think I wanted to get into this because last time you asked about sacrifice.
Yeah, for sure.
And this, a lot of this has to do with sacrifice.
Yeah.
For the next one. Think about that shadow, and here's a song.